Yes, the impending death of the PetroDollar. I got asked about this quite a lot last week because for whatever reason it started trending. I think the rumour went out that the 50-year PetroDollar agreement had come to an end. So I had loads of people asking me to comment on that. So I'll quickly cover it. I don't think it deserves a huge amount of time on this one.
You say rumour, did it not happen?
Not exactly, no. So I think where it came from is it is the case that in June 1974 the PetroDollar agreement was reached.
Right.
But it was kind of open-ended, and it didn't have a sort of 50-year timescale on it, and it wasn't quite as ironclad as a lot of people have made out. So, I mean, it has been the case that Saudi can sell oil in other currencies. Mm. They've just generally chosen not to, and they've largely stuck with the dollar system because the dollar has that sort of depth of liquidity. And also, if it takes in, 30 billion of rupees or whatever, what are you going to do with them? Right. It's not. There's only so much spice you can buy, so they tended to go with dollar because the dollar had that sort of depth of it, but it's not actually as such over. But the story is directionally true, even if it isn't literally true. So I do think the dollar system is waning, even if it's not this sort of hard cut-off that we've sort of seen. And actually, and this is the point you made to me, Catherine, just before we came on, is it's not so much it's not so much what it is transacted in that really matters, it's how it's stored.
Well, it's your ability to transact is the first point.
Well, yes.
i.e., if you don't have a bank account, then you have a problem transacting, as Iran does. So
yes.
You step back. In all these issues, including Bitcoin, the issue is where the transaction meets the real world, i.e. where you take the money out of to transact it, to put it into Bitcoin. And when you take it back out of Bitcoin, where it goes. That's the issue. The bank accounts, the cards.
Well, and of course, Russia was thrown off SWIFT. I mean, that's the sort of thing you're referring to, and Iran doesn't have access.
And many individuals don't have bank accounts or can't get bank accounts. And PayPal is the same. So we've seen it in this country. But this is the issue that, the draconian banking issue with the idea that they're private banks and they can do whatever they want to whatever country they want.
It's kind of become a mechanism of sort of global control, the banking system.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's kind of like the third major arm of government, the intelligence services, the governments and the banks.
And that's before we talk about digital currencies. Yes.
Yes, which might come up in the Reform Manifesto.
But the real issue is there have already been transactions. Venezuela was transacting oil for food. Zimbabwe, I think other places, a lot of places have done transactions. So India would not, as you did in your example, give them 50 billion rupees. It would have a deal to provide rice or grain or even remittances.
Yes, I mean the vast bulk of transactions have occurred in dollars historically.
Yeah,
but it's not quite as hard and fast as some of the people were sort of talking about on this stuff. So a very quick recap on the petrodollar, just to sort of bring everyone up to speed on this. So I might miss one or two details here, but this is broadly true. So there was a war, and after the war, the US basically had most of the gold. I think it had 75% of the gold reserves, and somebody, I suspect an American, thought it would be a really good idea to hang on to that gold. So they said...
Unlike Gordon Brown.
Yes, unlike Gordon Brown. So they said, I tell you what, why don't we have this clever Bretton Woods system where these pieces of paper are as good as gold? And somehow they convinced people that was indeed the case. So that worked for a long time. And basically the rest of the world said to America, okay, but you're not going to cheat on this, are you? And America said, no, we are definitely not going to cheat. These pieces of paper are definitely as good as gold. And then they cheated. So basically, by the 60s, it was increasingly obvious that the US was spending more than they could actually justify for their own gold reserves. So by 1970, the French were like, don't trust this. Let's have our gold back. And it sort of precipitated a crisis period where Nixon had to sort of break the connection between gold and the dollar. And the dollar came truly just bits of paper. Now, at that point, early 70s, the dollar system was floundering. It didn't really have a hard connection to anything. So what they did is they thought, well, okay, if we can link it to something tangible like oil, that will work. We've got a big military. Those Saudi people over there, they've got lots of oil. So why don't we do a deal with the House of Saud where we say, if you agree to price everything in, or pretty much everything in dollars, and then take the dollars that you earn from that and put them in US treasuries, then we will supply you with all the tanks and aeroplanes that you need so that you, the House of Saud, stay in control. And that system pretty much worked for a long time. In fact, we've got a little diagram here of broadly the system. So for those listening at home, I'll try and describe it. But essentially, you've got the US running a very large trade deficit with other developed nations that have a trade surplus, and they can basically send out bits of paper, so bonds, and they get actual stuff shipped back again, meaning the US can live beyond its means and have a larger military than it otherwise would.
Can I stop you there?
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
A second? There's an important distinction to make between a trade deficit and an internal deficit.
Okay.
For example, Japan has one of the biggest internal deficits to GDP, but it has it has overseas asset surpluses.
Quite a lot, in fact. Yes.
Lots. Which there's a big distinction, because it means Britain, of course, has terrible situation in both,
yes.
Obvious. But it means that Japan, in a hurry, can repatriate assets, can repatriate money. So its deficit, you can argue, doesn't really matter, because its deficit is just printed internally. It's a distribution issue internally. Yes. So supposing we had a closed world, a closed country, and we start having a deficit, we're distributing the chips around. Some people are going to win and some people are going to lose. People who don't have, you lower interest rates, pensioners don't get much on their savings, etc. But it doesn't actually affect your currency. And there is really quite an important point between these two, and people never really make this point. They just talk about deficits.
Yes, all worthwhile points, but might skim through just for the purposes. But no, you are absolutely right, and Japan is an interesting
and
case.
Most of Asia. So Asia is running big overseas surpluses.
Well, of course, they had their crisis back in '98, and they largely got their house in order with a lot of this stuff, where they sort of divested themselves of this untenable position that they were in, which looks like it may now be coming to the West. That starts in the periphery and moves to the centre type financial crisis could be on the verge of occurring somewhere here.
I think the more interesting one is Japan rather than the Asian crisis. The Asian crisis only affected a very small number of countries, Thailand and Indonesia and Malaysia. It did not affect all of Asia. So it was had very specific reasons in those countries, which was overlending by banks. Japan, of course, had its crisis in early 90s, much, much earlier. And the issue for me about why Japan had its crisis in the 90s and we are starting to see the crisis now is about demographics. It's not about this. It's about all of this is downstream of demographics. When the baby boomers start to retire, 2008, that's when the crisis starts to hit. And Japan has the oldest age demographic.
Well, because they have basically the same issue, but it's moved back about 15 years. So their demographic collapse basically just happened earlier. So you're seeing the same trends.
Well, and they didn't prop it up with immigration. But I would still argue, we'll go on to this, that Japan is doing a jolly sight better socially, culturally, without its immigration.
But yeah, it's a good point, though. I'd rather have that problem. I'd rather have, we haven't got enough immigrants than the situation that we are in.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a house for free in Japan.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
Well, there's lots in the country, but we've got plenty of places. Anyway, we're diverging.
The thing I was interested in, if you talk about the petrodollar, is specifically Saudi Arabia, because I happen to be very, very interested in Richard Nixon, one of the earliest series I did on my own channel.
Oh, right.
History Bro, check it out, like and subscribe. Read quite a few books about Nixon, fascinated by Nixon and the Nixon era of the Vietnam War and coming off the gold standard. And of course, there was an oil crisis. I'm too young to remember it myself. It was before my time. But the gold standard thing and OPEC and coming off and the oil producing countries, in a way, holding America to ransom, in a sense that's maybe a bit strong. But anyway, it's all wrapped up. There's much more than just Nixon deciding, it's probably best if we come off the gold standard. He didn't just wake up one morning and think, I think that's for the best, let's do that.
Well, he didn't really have much choice.
Big story, right?
Yes.
He was probably correct. He didn't really have much choice. He was sort of been painted into a corner in all sorts of economic senses. But I don't know if you know about this, but I don't. I'm genuinely asking. Because there's Aramco, isn't there? That's the Saudi...
Aramco, yeah.
So you talk about bank accounts and sort of the actual movement of monies. I wonder, I really don't know the answer. I wonder, the exact relationship between Aramco and the actual royal house of Al Saud, their actual relationship.
Oh, I don't know that level of personnel.
Like whose bank accounts are whose and how it really all works. I don't know. I'm not sure if.
There is another interesting thing which I didn't bring into this segment because I thought I'd just skim through it quickly. But
Sorry.
The Rothschilds have been making moves in Saudi recently. And that's
interesting.
That's probably, I think, a bigger story than all of this kind of stuff, actually. And it kind of lines up, but which I can't remember which of the Rothschilds, but was it Nathan or something? But anyway, he's been spending a lot of time in Saudi Arabia lately, and so goes to your point about the sort of connection to the wider financial system. Is like, okay, what are they lining up there? Something is coming down the track. But just to carry on with this, but the issue you've got, of course, is. If you've got a system where the dollar is predominant in the world and transactions are chiefly priced in the dollar and therefore you've got a load of dollars, what do you do with it? Well, you stick it into US treasuries and the US stock market and so on. That all works very well all the time. Everybody trusts the dollar is a reliable store of value.
No, I would argue it's a different trust. On looking at that, you see frozen Russian assets.
Yes.
This is not just...
What aspect of your trust are you picking up on there?
That you get your assets frozen.
Oh, yes.
This is far worse than having a bit of deflation or the currency going down a little bit. This is 100% of your assets. This is the most important point.
Yeah, and it was shocking to me when they did this, actually. Yeah. When they did it.
They can do it to anybody.
But the only smart thing the Americans did when they froze the Russian assets is they got the EU to do it as well. So that there wasn't that rotation into the euro. Both of them suffered. And if you take out the US and the euro, there isn't really a sort of third-party transaction. I mean, maybe there's yen and maybe the renminbi or something, but it was smart of them to do it to push the EU into doing this as well. But yeah, so I mean, this is my sort of key point, is that trust in the system, because basically Russia's too big to sanction. And especially when they're allied with China, it's like, okay, you're going to sanction the majority of the world's commodities, oil. Because Venezuela, that's sanctioned as well. So I mean, you take that whole block. It's no longer the West sanctioning these places; it's the West cutting themselves off from these places.
It's funny because Russia and China, but particularly Russia, is incredibly resource rich. Obviously, I'm stating the obvious. Everyone knows that. But incredibly resource rich. So it's not like Venezuela. It's not like Germany.
Venezuela
or Britain.
Oil rich.
Well, oil rich. But no, Russia's got everything, right? Everything. Rare metals, rare earth metals, everything. I don't think Venezuela's got everything it could possibly. It's not like Russia's like there's nothing Russia wants for.
No,
right?
it has a ridiculous amount of commodities. Ridiculous amount.
Right. So it's more like, exactly as you say, it's more like we're cutting ourselves off from them rather than we're cutting them out.
Yeah. It's too big to sanction. He's basically taken that.
Yeah.
And what this kind of is leading to is, I mean, I picked this one particular story, but I mean, there are thousands like this. Central banks are saying maybe not so much to the dollar. Maybe we're going to have a little bit more gold, and not only that, but they're moving it back again. So gold is one of those funny things. For years, it was heavily concentrated in just a couple of places, New York and London. And the reason they did that is because you want that sort of surety that it hasn't been tampered with. So you want just a couple of very high trust locations where the whole world believes, okay, these people are not going to drill into them and put titanium into them or do any other sort of funny stuff. So it was focused around a couple of locations for a long time. And not only are central banks buying more gold, is they're sort of moving it to their own custody as well.
There's another issue about gold, especially for individuals. rules, which is that many people do not buy physical gold. They buy an
I hate it when they
ETF
do that, yeah.
or they buy a future.
Yeah.
And there's certainly been issues in the silver market about whether there really is enough silver to back these transactions, because it's never really
Very
been
questionable.
tested.
Yeah, very questionable.
And then, of course, again, that's another issue of trust.
Yes,
Can I
quite.
do a quick 1 minute conspiracy theory
Go on,
corner?
On
The
silver.
idea that nobody's, I don't know if this is true, but the idea that no one's checked in Fort Knox for years and years and years to see if the bullion's actually still
I
there.
looked into that once, yeah. So the last
It
time
might not be true. It might be like, no, they did it in like 2015.
No.
or
A
something, but
a bunch of senators got taken round in, I think, 74, and that was the last time.
Is that definitely true? Because if that's definitely true, that is worrying, isn't it? Like, what's the problem?
Well-
Just show us the bullion. What's the problem, guys?
Yeah,
Just let's have a quick look. Anyway,
And I
bit of
don't.
aside.
And no president for a very long time has toured Fort Knox either. So it's like it's super suspect. Something is going on there.
and I think they've got another repository that's even bigger, or supposed to be even bigger than Fort Knox. I can't remember its name, but somewhere else. And again, the same thing. No one's actually seen.
I mean, if you're going into conspiracy
physical-
theories, I'd also say that I think the US is not only underreporting its gold, I think China is dramatically underreporting how much gold it's got. Because you can see how much is moving through the Shanghai exchange at any one time. And a lot of it's going to China. Now, yes, Chinese individuals do buy gold, but the volumes moving through and heading into China suggest that the Chinese reserves are significantly high, and they might be waiting for the
significantly
right.
higher or lower.
Oh, a lot higher. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So I'm sure with whatever it is they claim that they've got, whatever it is, it's like 4,000. I'm sure it's like 5 times that or something. And they might be waiting for a moment of maximum dollar weakness to step in and say, oh, by the way, our currency is backed, whatever, 20% by gold or something. I don't know what they're going to do, but there is definitely something going up with gold there. Now, so I'll just close this off by saying, even though it is not literally the case that the dollar system has ended, despite what you've seen on Twitter and social media,
PetroDollar.
the petrodollar has ended, as you might have seen over the past week or so. Even though it's not literally true, it is directionally true. And the reason I say that is because ultimately, no matter what set of rules you have, it comes down to people who are in power who enforce or don't enforce those. And what you're seeing is that basically the people in the world are losing respect for the US system. So for those of you listening at home, I'm showing the ridiculous picture of Joe Biden fist bumping MBS, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Now, Biden, while he was running for his nomination, he called MBS a monstrosity. He said he wanted to destroy him. He made all sorts of inflammatory statements saying he's beyond the pale and all the rest of it. And then he gets elected and he has to meet him, but he refuses to shake his hand, so he decides to do a fist bump instead.
Well, no one's allowed to touch the Crown Prince. You're not supposed to even fist bump him.
Well, funny you should say that. Let's look how another world leader is met. Oh, hang on, where's me?
I saw a clip of Trump walking past him and slapping him on the shoulder.
Yeah,
Have you seen that?
that's another one. So I mean, just look at the difference in the body language between the absurd. Oh, there we go.
They did
Oh, that
shake
was a bit
hands.
quick.
There.
There we go. But anyways, I mean, and you see the same thing with when Z goes to meet him. It is a warm personal relationship, whereas Biden has failed on many fronts. So yeah. It's don't worry. It is a little bit overstated, the petrodollar story, but it is directionally true, nevertheless.
What I'll say with Biden or the Biden administration and Saudi, if you take, for example, the relationship that the Bush family, George Bush Jr., had with the Saudis, it was extremely, extremely close.
Yes.
Extremely close. They were genuinely friends and stuff.
Yes.
And of course, Obama and Biden are sort of fairly pro-Iran. I mean, pro-Iran is a funny thing to say, but much more pro-Iran than Trump or George Bush or the others. So you can see how, from the Saudis' point of view, they might not be particularly happy with Biden and Biden's administration.
Another thing that Biden did
You
is
can get why they lock horns, at least politically.
And Biden did a whole bunch of stuff, like he lifted the sanctions on the Houthis before the current thing blew up. Who were sort of
and he tore up Trump's deal to screw with the Iranian nuclear program. Biden just tore that up. The Saudis would hate that, right?
Yeah.
They would hate to see that.
Oh, there have been many insults levelled against them.
Right.
Many insults at this point.
Right.
But yes, so broadly true. But the dollar unfortunately has a few days left, but it is going in that direction.
Hi folks, thanks for watching. You can watch the entire podcast, The Lotus Eaters, live at 1 p.m. only on lotuseats.com. And while you're there, you could sign up for £5 a month if you want to support us, help us keep the lights on, because of course we're demonetized on YouTube. And you can watch Dan Tubbs' amazing Brokenomics series, where he breaks down everything economic and various other things beside. It's excellent stuff, and we appreciate all the support. Thanks very much.